Just like in Dungeons & Dragons, Baldur's Gate 3 lets you multiclass, but it works a little differently here. In this video, we're going to go over how to multiclass, the pros and cons of multiclassing, and some good class combinations to get you started. What is multiclassing? In case you're new to D&D or Baldur's Gate 3, multiclassing lets you level up multiple classes in order to double dip on specific spells, actions, and proficiencies. Once you hit level 2, click this little button in the level up screen and you can choose a second class. If you don't see that button, it probably means you're playing on the Explorer difficulty setting. If you want to try multiclassing without cranking up the combat, just change the difficulty, respec with withers, and then turn the difficulty back down. While the game does warn you that multiclassing is meant for experienced players, you can respec and reclass with withers as much as you want as long as you have the coin, or if you quick save beforehand. Should you multiclass? The good news is that there are no restrictions or requirements when it comes to multiclassing. If you've never played D&D before and this is your first run in Baldur's Gate 3, I would advise against it. The right pair of classes can make for some powerful combinations, but multiclassing will lock you out of high-level spells and abilities. This is because each time you level up, you can only level up one of your classes. For example, say you wanted to multiclass a rogue and a fighter in order to access sneak attacks and adrenaline surge. You'd need to hit level 2 with fighter, meaning you can't level up your rogue class during that time. That means rather than having a level 3 fighter, you'd have a level 2 fighter and a level 1 rogue. The problem is that since Baldur's Gate 3 caps out at level 12, you can only level up 11 times. This means that neither class can hit level 12, and you won't be able to access any level 12 abilities or feats. This can make multiclassing particularly difficult in the early hours because when you hit level 5 with a rogue fighter class, you won't unlock that super handy extra attack. If multiclassing is something you're interested in, I recommend waiting until you've leveled up a few times, that way you'll have a bit more flexibility when you respec. Additionally, if you decide to multiclass, be sure to adjust your character's attributes accordingly. Your attributes will default to the recommended attributes for your primary class. This may not be ideal depending on which classes you want to multiclass. For example, say you wanted to try out a Druid Sorcerer class. Druids use Wisdom as their spellcasting modifier, while Sorcerers use Charisma. You'd split your spells across 2 different modifiers. This means that whichever class you choose first will determine your primary attribute. A Rogue's primary attribute is Dexterity, a Fighter's is Strength, and a Sorcerer's is Charisma. Even among classes that have the same primary attribute, they can differ in terms of proficiency. So technically, there is a difference between a Sorcerer Bard and a Bard Sorcerer, even though both classes use Charisma as their primary attribute. If you're interested in multiclassing but you still feel a little overwhelmed, we're going to run through some basic class combinations to help you get the idea. First, I'd recommend getting to level 5 or 6, that way you can adequately dip into both classes. Then make sure you've recruited withers from the crypt near the beach at the beginning of the game. Return to camp and save before you fork over 100 gold to change your class. This way you can experiment without breaking the bank. Also, keep in mind that the class we list first should be your primary class if you choose to follow these recommendations. The Druid Barbarian makes for an excellent tank combo. Every time you rage, you increase your damage resistance. Then wild shape into a boar in order to have a fresh HP pool. We recommend choosing the Circle of the Moon subclass, that way you have access to the Polar Bear, which starts with 30 HP. Then at Barbarian level 2, we recommend choosing the Wild Heart subclass with the Bestial Heart of a Bear. This will further increase your damage resistance. Just make sure to rage before you wild shape, otherwise this won't work. Both the Sorcerer and the Bard share a Charisma proficiency, making them an excellent pairing for spellcasting. We recommend choosing the Sorcerer as your primary class because of their Constitution proficiency. This will make it much harder for your Sorcerer Bard to break concentration when casting and holding spells. Additionally, once you hit level 2 with the Sorcerer class, you'll unlock Meta Magic, which allows you to warp Sorcerer and Bard spells for satisfying effects. For example, when you hit Sorcerer level 2, you could choose Meta Magic Twin Spells, which allows you to cast a chosen spell twice in the same action. This pairs extremely well with a handful of Bard spells. If you want high DPS, the Fighter Rogue multiclass is an excellent choice. With this build, you can combine the Fighter's high melee damage and action surge with the Rogue sneak attack bonuses. We recommend going Champion Fighter subclass and Assassin Rogue subclass in order to maximize your crit chances. Once you hit level 5 with the Fighter class, you'll unlock an extra action allowing you to potentially hit 4 times, one of which being a sneak attack if you're willing to burn the Fighter's action surge ability. So that brings us back to the beginning. Should you multiclass? It depends. If you have a very specific build in mind that requires abilities from different classes, then go for it. But do you need to multiclass in order to succeed in Baldur's Gate 3? Not at all. I think if this is your first playthrough, it's probably better to stick with one class and see it through to the end. But if you're like me and you already have 6 campaigns going, then maybe you should give multiclassing a shot to mix things up. Like I said, there's plenty to experiment with, and if you have some stellar builds you want to share, drop them in the comments below.